Why do people who never say no always end up being the first ones contacted when someone needs a favor, but the last ones remembered when there's recognition or reward? Here's the brutal truth that will sting. Your kindness isn't seen as virtue. It's seen as weakness. And weakness, in human nature, is an invitation for exploitation. You wake up, check your messages, and there they are. 3 people asking for favors, 2 colleagues dumping their responsibilities on you, 1 friend who desperately needs to talk. You sigh, push down that familiar knot in your stomach, and start typing, of course, done. No problem, for the 4th time before noon. Sound familiar? 500 years ago, Niccolò Machiavelli observed something devastating about human nature. People respect those who can say no without needing to explain why. He called this the power of strategic silence. While others were writing about love and virtue, Machiavelli was dissecting the raw mechanics of human behavior like a surgeon examining a beating heart. Today I'm going to show you how Machiavelli discovered that true power doesn't lie in the words you speak, but in the ones you deliberately choose not to speak. Your problem didn't start yesterday. It started when you were a child, being programmed to believe that being useful means being valuable. Every time you heard good children help others, every time you got praised for sacrificing your time, every time you learned that love came with the price tag of availability, you were being conditioned. Machiavelli observed that this is the origin of voluntary servitude. Not the kind with chains and whips, but the subtle kind where your identity becomes dependent on being necessary to others. You learn to equate your worth with your usefulness. And now you're trapped in a cycle where saying no feels like erasing yourself. Think about it. When was the last time you felt truly valuable without doing something for someone else? When did you last feel worthy of love and respect simply for existing, not for performing? This isn't a character flaw. It's a survival strategy you learned early that has become your prison in adult life. You're not being weak. You're using an inadequate strategy for the wrong game. At work, you're always the person who stays late, accepts extra projects, covers for colleagues. You tell yourself you're being professional, building your reputation. But what's really happening? More work, same salary. Your dedication isn't being rewarded. It's being exploited. Your manager knows they can rely on you precisely because you've never given them a reason to question their demands. Here's the twisted logic. The person who occasionally says no gets their requests taken more seriously. The person who always says yes gets treated like a resource, not a professional. In your relationships, you always cancel your plans when someone needs you. You always lend money. You always offer your house, your car, your time. You pride yourself on being the friend people can count on. But notice something. You've become a convenience, not a priority. When was the last time someone rearranged their schedule for you? When did someone last offer you help without you asking? You're surrounded by people who call you when they need something. But how many would call just to check how you're doing? In your family, you've become the official problem solver, the one who never gets to have problems because you're always resolving everyone else's. Your siblings call when they need money. Your parents call when they need technical support. Your cousins call when they need a favor. But who do you call when you need support? You've created a role for yourself that seems noble, but is actually a form of emotional servitude. You're the family's emergency contact, but not their first choice for celebration. Machiavelli would say, this isn't happening to you by accident. It's happening because of a fundamental misunderstanding about human nature that you've been carrying your entire life. You believe that by being endlessly available, people will see your value and reciprocate. You think that by always saying yes, you're building a bank of goodwill that people will honor when you need it. You imagine that by being the good person, you're creating the foundation for meaningful relationships. But here's what Machiavelli knew. Human beings don't value what costs them nothing to obtain. This misunderstanding runs deeper than you think. You've been operating under the illusion that your availability is an investment in future reciprocity. But Machiavelli discovered something that cuts to the bone. The more available you become, the less valuable you appear. He wrote, "What is always present loses its value. People don't treasure what they can access anytime they want. You've accidentally trained everyone around you to see you as a resource, not as a person. And here's the cruel irony. The people who respect you least are often the ones who benefit from you most." Machiavelli called this the principle of destructive familiarity. The closer you make yourself to someone's daily convenience, the further you move from their respect. You've become like the air they breathe, essential, but completely taken for granted until it's gone. Let's talk about what this is really costing you, because the price is higher than you realize. Your mental health is deteriorating in ways you might not even recognize. You've developed what I call a utility complex. Your self-esteem has become dependent on being useful to others. When your phone isn't buzzing with requests, when no one needs your help, you feel purposeless. You've turned your worth into a drug, and other people's needs have become your dealer. This isn't just psychological theory, it's a literal addiction. Your brain releases dopamine every time someone needs you, every time you solve a problem, every time you save the day. But like any addiction, you need increasingly larger doses to feel the same high. More favors, bigger sacrifices, greater availability. And when you're not being used, you experience something like withdrawal, anxiety, restlessness, a gnawing feeling that you're not doing enough, being enough, giving enough. You've weaponized your own kindness against yourself. In your relationships, something even more sinister is happening. You've become a magnet for takers, people who are wired to extract value from others. They can smell your inability to say no from miles away. It's not conscious predation. It's instinctive. They're drawn to you the same way water flows downhill, naturally, inevitably. Your relationships have become transactional, but you're the only one who doesn't realize it. You give, they receive. You accommodate, they demand. You sacrifice, they benefit. And because you never ask for reciprocity, they never learn to give it. Here's what hurts the most. You've never experienced true reciprocity. You don't even know what it feels like to have someone fight for you the way you fight for others. You've created a world where you're everyone's hero, but no one's priority. Meanwhile, your own potential is dying a slow death. You're living everyone else's life while your dreams collect dust. Your goals get pushed to someday because you're too busy making other people's dreams come true today. You've become a supporting character in your own story. And the worst part is, you think that makes you noble. Machiavelli observed that this kind of person becomes resentful over time. But they can't express that resentment because good people don't feel anger. So you swallow it. You push it down. You tell yourself you're being selfless, while a toxic cocktail of bitterness and exhaustion corrodes your soul from the inside. You smile while you're dying inside. You say, happy to help, while calculating how much of your life you've given away. You maintain the facade of the perpetually positive person, while your spirit slowly suffocates under the weight of everyone else's expectations. The most tragic part? You've convinced yourself that this is love, that this is how good relationships work, that sacrifice is the currency of connection. But what you've actually created is a sophisticated form of emotional servitude, and you're both the slave and the master who keeps tightening the chains. Most people who recognize this problem try to solve it by becoming more assertive. They start saying no, but they do it wrong. They give long explanations, detailed justifications, elaborate apologies for their refusal. "I'm so sorry, but I can't help you move this weekend because I have this thing with my family. And I promised I'd be there. And I know you really need help, but maybe next time?" Machiavelli would have laughed at this approach. When you over-explain your no, you're actually confessing that you're not sure you have the right to refuse. You're asking for permission to have boundaries. You're negotiating when you should be declaring. This kind of assertiveness training misses the fundamental point. It's not about learning to say no more eloquently. It's about understanding why you need to explain yourself to begin with. It's about recognizing that your compulsive availability isn't kindness. It's fear dressed up as virtue. But here's where Machiavelli's insight becomes revolutionary, and where everything you thought you knew about power and respect gets turned upside down. Machiavelli discovered something that modern psychology is only now beginning to understand. True power doesn't come from being feared or loved. It comes from being respected. And respect is earned not through availability, but through selectivity. Not through accommodation, but through the courage to choose when, how, and for whom you make yourself accessible. Think about the people you respect most in your life. Are they the ones who drop everything for everyone? Or are they the ones who seem to have invisible boundaries that others naturally honor? The ones who, when they say yes to you, make you feel genuinely chosen rather than simply accommodated? Machiavelli called this the power of strategic silence. It's not about being rude, cold, or unavailable. It's about understanding that your energy, your time, your attention are finite resources. And like any finite resource, they become valuable only when they're not freely distributed to anyone who asks. Here's the principle that will change everything. When you stop being constantly available, something magical happens in people's perception of you. They start to plan ahead to get your attention. They begin to value your time and opinions more highly. They treat their requests to you with greater care and consideration. Most importantly, they start seeing you as someone with a life of your own, not as a resource that exists for their convenience. But this transformation goes deeper than just changing how others see you. It changes how you see yourself. For the first time, you experience what Machiavelli called true freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to choose what deserves your energy. You stop being reactive and become strategic. You stop being a victim of other people's urgency and become the architect of your own priorities. This is when you discover something profound about human nature that Machiavelli understood centuries ago. People don't actually want you to be endlessly available. They want you to be selectively available to them. They want to feel that when you choose them, it means something. They want your yes to carry weight because your no is a real possibility. Think about it like this. Imagine two friends. One always says yes to your invitations, always accommodates your schedule, always makes time for you no matter what. The other sometimes says, "I can't make it this week. But how about next Thursday?" Which friend's acceptance feels more meaningful when it comes? Which friend do you find yourself working harder to maintain a relationship with? The constantly available friend becomes like background music, always there, but never really heard. The selectively available friend becomes like a favorite song, anticipated, appreciated, remembered. Your relationships have been suffering because you've eliminated the element that makes connection meaningful: choice. When you remove your ability to say no, you also remove the meaning from your yes. You've turned yourself into a yes machine rather than a thinking, choosing, autonomous person. This affects every area of your life in ways you haven't fully realized. Your career stagnates because you're too busy being useful to be strategic. Your personal goals remain unrealized because you're too occupied with other people's priorities to pursue your own. Your self-respect erodes because you've trained yourself to value others' needs above your own judgment. Even your physical health suffers. Your body keeps the score of every boundary violation. Every time you said yes when you meant no. Every moment you chose others' comfort over your own well-being. The stress of constant availability manifests as fatigue, anxiety, depression, and a dozen other symptoms that you probably attribute to everything except the real cause. You've forgotten how to honor your own limits. But here's where most people get it wrong when they try to change. They think the solution is to become more assertive, to learn better ways to say no, to practice saying, "I'm not available," with confidence. They attend workshops on boundary setting and read books about being more assertive. This misses the point entirely. The problem isn't that you don't know how to say no. The problem is that you believe you need to justify your no with explanations, apologies, and elaborate reasoning. You think saying no requires a valid excuse that others will accept. Machiavelli would tell you this approach reveals your fundamental misunderstanding of power dynamics. When you over-explain your boundaries, you're actually asking for permission to have them. You're submitting your decision for approval, rather than simply making it. Real power, the kind that commands respect without demanding it, operates differently. It doesn't explain, justify, or apologize for its choices. It simply chooses, and expects that choice to be respected because it comes from someone who respects themselves. This is the difference between assertiveness training and what Machiavelli understood about human nature. Assertiveness is about learning to fight better. But strategic silence is about not needing to fight at all. The solution lies in understanding what Machiavelli called the art of controlled scarcity. This isn't about becoming unavailable or turning into a cold, distant person. It's about becoming selective in a way that honors both yourself and the people who deserve your energy. Think of it this way. Imagine two sources of water. One is a faucet, always available. Just turn the handle and water flows. Because it's always there, you never think about it, never value it, never plan around it. You use it carelessly because you know it will always be there tomorrow. The other is an artesian well. To access this water, you have to dig deep, work for it, plan ahead. Because accessing it requires effort, every drop feels precious. You don't waste it. You appreciate it. You remember where you found it, and you return to it with respect. Machiavelli understood that human beings operate the same way with people. The faucet person gets taken for granted. The well person gets treasured. You've been living as everyone's faucet, always flowing, never valued, constantly depleted. But when you learn to become the well, something extraordinary happens. People start to approach you differently. They plan ahead before making requests. They consider whether what they're asking is truly important. They become more thoughtful about how they use your time and energy. More importantly, they start to see you as someone with depth. Someone worth the effort of understanding rather than simply using. This transformation happens through what Machiavelli recognized as the most powerful force in human relationships, the strategic pause. Not the aggressive pause of someone trying to make a point, but the natural pause of someone who genuinely considers their options before responding. When someone asks you for something, your automatic response has been trained to be immediate accommodation. Yes, of course. No problem. I'll figure it out. But what if instead you simply paused? What if you said, "Let me check my schedule and get back to you"? This pause accomplishes something profound. It reminds both you and the other person that you have a life, priorities, and choices. It reframes the interaction from, "Will you help me so?" to, "Is this something that fits into your life right now?" The subtle difference changes everything. In that pause, you reclaim something you've been giving away for years. The right to consider what serves your own interests alongside what serves theirs. You're not being selfish. You're being strategic. You're not being mean. You're being mindful. But here's what makes Machiavelli's approach so brilliant. It works because it aligns with how people actually think, not how we wish they thought. When you're instantly available, people's brains categorize you as a known quantity, predictable, controllable, safe to ignore until needed. But when you introduce the element of uncertainty, when your availability requires consideration, their brains shift you into a different category. Valuable person who might say no. This isn't manipulation, it's psychology. People value what they have to work for. They respect what they can't control. They remember what doesn't come easily. You've been making yourself too easy to access, too predictable to value, too available to respect. For the first time, you experience what Machiavelli called true freedom. Not the chaotic freedom of doing whatever you want, but the mature freedom of choosing what aligns with your values, goals, and well-being. You become the author of your own life story rather than a supporting character in everyone else's. This shift creates a ripple effect throughout your entire existence. Your relationships become more balanced because they're based on mutual choice rather than one-sided accommodation. Your work becomes more fulfilling because you're investing your energy strategically rather than reactively. Your personal goals finally get attention because you're no longer giving all your resources away before considering your own needs. Most surprisingly, people don't respect you less for this change. They respect you more. They start to see you as someone who values themselves. And human psychology automatically assigns higher worth to people who demonstrate self-respect. Your opinions carry more weight because they come from someone who clearly has standards. Your time becomes more sought after because it's no longer infinitely available. Your yes becomes more meaningful because your no is a real possibility. You discover that the relationships that can't survive your boundaries weren't actually relationships. They were extraction systems disguised as friendships. The people who get angry when you start honoring your own needs were never invested in your well-being. They were invested in your availability. They saw you as a service, not as a person. And the people who remain? They become your true allies. They're the ones who respected you enough to accept that you're a whole person with your own life, not just a resource for their convenience. These are the relationships worth having. The ones based on mutual respect rather than one-sided dependency. The beautiful paradox is this. By becoming less available to everyone, you become more present for the people who matter. By saying no more often, your yes carries more weight. By honoring your own boundaries, you teach others to honor them too. This isn't about becoming cold or disconnected. It's about becoming connected to yourself first, so that your connections with others come from strength rather than depletion, from choice rather than compulsion, from love rather than fear. Machiavelli understood that respect isn't something you can demand or beg for. It's something you command through your actions, your choices, and yes, your strategic silences. when you stop explaining yourself constantly. Stop apologizing for having boundaries. Stop seeking permission to live your own life. Something shifts in how the world sees you. You transform from someone who reacts to everyone else's agenda into someone who operates from their own center of power. From someone who accommodates to someone who chooses. From someone who serves everyone to someone who selects worthy recipients of their energy. This is the liberation Machiavelli promised. Not freedom from all obligations, but freedom to choose which obligations serve your highest good. So how do you begin this transformation? How do you go from being everyone's faucet to becoming their artesian well? The answer lies in what I call the Machiavellian pause. A deceptively simple practice that will rewire how people see you and how you see yourself. Before responding to any request, any favor, any demand on your time or energy, pause. It doesn't need to be long. 2 seconds is enough. But in those 2 seconds, ask yourself one crucial question. Does this serve my interests or only theirs? Notice I didn't say, does this help them? Or, is this a good thing to do? Those questions keep you trapped in the same pattern of endless accommodation. The question is whether it serves your interests too. Your growth, your goals, your well-being, your values. If you don't know the answer immediately, if you have to think about it, if you feel that familiar tug of obligation without enthusiasm, you have your answer. Say, let me check my schedule and get back to you. Nothing more. No apologies, no explanations, no promises about when you'll respond. This simple phrase accomplishes something revolutionary. It establishes that you have a life, priorities, and a decision-making process that doesn't revolve around other people's urgency. It creates space between stimulus and response, the space where your power lives. Most people will respect this immediately because it signals that you respect yourself. The few who push back, who demand immediate answers, who get frustrated by your pause, those are exactly the people you need to be most careful with. Their reaction tells you everything you need to know about how they see you. But here's what will surprise you. Most people don't actually want you to say yes to everything. They want to know that when you say yes, it means something. They want to feel that your time and energy are valuable enough that getting them requires consideration, not just automatic compliance. When you implement this pause, you'll notice something interesting happening. People will start planning ahead before approaching you. They'll think more carefully about what they're asking. They'll present their requests with more context and consideration. Why? Because they're no longer dealing with a pushover. They're dealing with someone who makes thoughtful choices. Your relationships will begin to shift. The people who are unconsciously exploiting your availability will either adjust their behavior or drift away. The people who genuinely care about you will respect your boundaries and often express appreciation for your honesty about your limits. At work, something magical happens. When you stop being the person who always stays late, always takes on extra projects, always covers for others, your actual contributions become more visible. You're no longer the reliable background resource. You're the strategic thinker who chooses where to invest their talents. Your manager starts to see you differently. Instead of thinking, I can always count on your name to handle this, they start thinking, I need to make a compelling case if I want your name to take this on. Your value increases because your availability decreases. In your personal life, you'll discover something profound. You actually have energy left for the things and people you care about. When you stop giving everything to everyone, you have something meaningful to give to those who deserve it. Your friendships become more intentional. Your family relationships improve because you're present by choice, not obligation. You'll also notice changes within yourself. That constant, low-level resentment starts to fade because you're no longer saying yes when you mean no. Your self-respect grows because you're honoring your own judgment instead of deferring to everyone else's needs. You sleep better because you're not carrying the weight of a dozen commitments you didn't really want to make. But perhaps most importantly, you'll experience something you may have forgotten: the feeling of being genuinely chosen. When people work to earn your time and attention, when they respect your boundaries and appreciate your contributions, you remember what healthy relationships feel like. The people who remain in your life after you implement these changes are your real tribe. They're the ones who saw you as a person worth respecting, not just a service worth using. Now, I want you to do something that might be uncomfortable. Think about the biggest favor you've done for someone who never did anything meaningful for you in return. The person who called you in crisis but never checked on you during your difficulties. The one who borrowed money, time, or emotional energy, but never offered anything back. What was that favor? And be honest with yourself. Why did you do it? Was it because you genuinely wanted to help? Or because you couldn't bear the discomfort of saying no? Was it because you believed it would strengthen your relationship? Or because you were afraid of what would happen if you refused? Machiavelli posed a similar question 500 years ago, and it remains devastatingly relevant today. What's the biggest favor you can do for someone who has never done anything for you? The answer reveals whether you're operating from strength or from fear, from choice or from compulsion. Share your story in the comments. But more importantly, be brutally honest with yourself about your motivations. That honesty is the first step toward freedom. Remember this: respect isn't something you ask for. It's something you earn through your actions and choices. And you earn it not through what you say, but through what you choose not to do without thinking twice. The person who can say no without explanation, who can pause without apology, who can choose without justification, that person commands respect not because they demand it, but because they demonstrate that they respect themselves. Machiavelli's greatest insight wasn't about political power or manipulation. It was about the simple truth that how others treat you is a direct reflection of how you treat yourself. Change that, and you change everything. Your transformation starts with the next request someone makes of you. Will you be the faucet, or will you be the well? The choice, finally, is yours.